Have you ever wondered why your prayers seem to echo into an empty void, never quite reaching their destination? Why, despite your unwavering faith, that abundance you've been seeking continues to slip through your fingers like sand? What if I told you that for centuries, perhaps even millennia, we've all been getting it catastrophically wrong? There's a phrase you've heard countless times, repeated in churches, whispered in devotions, quoted by spiritual teachers across the globe. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Almost poetic. But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to admit. We've been repeating these sacred words without the slightest understanding of what they actually mean. We've turned profound spiritual wisdom into empty religious rhetoric, a mantra devoid of its transformative power. Think about it for a moment. Has this ever happened to you? You've prayed earnestly for something, maybe financial breakthrough, maybe healing, maybe a relationship to mend, and yet nothing changes. You've tried visualization, positive affirmations, reading every self-help book you could find, attending every church service, doing everything the spiritual gurus told you to do. But still, that deep sense of lack persists. Still, you feel like you're chasing something that remains perpetually out of reach. You're not alone in this struggle, and more importantly, it's not your fault. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, what if the problem isn't your faith, your worthiness, or your spiritual practice? What if the problem is that we've been looking in entirely the wrong direction? Smith Wigglesworth, a spiritual teacher whose insights have been largely overlooked by mainstream religion, discovered something revolutionary that the religious establishment has either missed or deliberately hidden for generations. He uncovered that when Jesus spoke about the kingdom of God, he wasn't talking about some distant heavenly realm you access after death. He wasn't describing a reward system where good behavior earns you a golden ticket to paradise. He was pointing to something infinitely more immediate, more accessible, more powerful than anything we've been taught. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform not just your spiritual practice, but your entire experience of reality. The kingdom Jesus spoke of isn't a location. It's a state of consciousness. It's not somewhere you go. It's something you recognize. And here's where it gets truly mind-bending. This kingdom, this divine presence, this infinite source of everything you've been desperately seeking outside yourself, it's already within you right now in this very moment. Not as a metaphor, not as a comforting belief, but as a living, breathing reality. When Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom," he wasn't adding another item to your spiritual to-do list. He wasn't telling you to pray harder, believe stronger, or sacrifice more. He was inviting you to make a fundamental shift in where you look for solutions, for peace, for abundance, for everything. And this shift, as Smith Wigglesworth discovered through years of spiritual exploration and teaching thousands of seekers, changes absolutely everything without you having to change anything at all on the outside. But what does this actually mean in practical terms? How do you seek this kingdom when you can't see it, touch it, or travel to it? And why have so many of us spent our entire lives seeking second when we should have been seeking first? These questions lead us to something profound, something that once understood. Here's the uncomfortable reality that most spiritual teachers won't tell you. You've been doing it backwards your entire life. We all have. We've been trained, conditioned, programmed from childhood to approach spirituality in a way that virtually guarantees failure. Think about the last time you really needed something. Maybe money was tight, maybe your health was failing, maybe a relationship was crumbling. What did you do? You prayed, right? You asked, you begged, you pleaded with God to intervene, to fix it, to deliver the solution you desperately needed. And this seems perfectly reasonable, doesn't it? After all, isn't that what prayer is supposed to be? A cosmic request line where you place your order and wait for divine delivery? This is what Smith Wigglesworth called seeking second, and it's the fundamental error that keeps millions of people trapped in spiritual desperation. We've been taught to put the material world first, our problems, our lack, our circumstances, and then expect consciousness, expect God, expect the universe to serve those material concerns. We're essentially treating the divine like a cosmic vending machine, inserting prayers like coins and waiting for blessings to drop out the bottom. If you want more of these transformative teachings, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more we're exploring together, and I don't want you to miss it. But what if this entire framework is built on a false premise? What if the very act of praying for things, of begging for healing, of desperately visualizing outcomes actually reinforces the exact consciousness of lack you're trying to escape? You see, every time you pray for abundance, you're unconsciously affirming that abundance isn't already present. Every time you beg for healing, you're reinforcing the belief in sickness as your primary reality. Every time you plead for divine intervention, you're declaring that you're separate from the divine, disconnected, powerless, waiting for some external force to save you. This is the hidden truth that transforms everything once you truly grasp it. God isn't separate from you. Infinite intelligence isn't sitting somewhere in the clouds, deciding whether you've been good enough, whether you've prayed eloquently enough, whether you deserve what you're asking for. The divine isn't a distant parent you need to convince or manipulate through the right combination of words and rituals. This is perhaps the most revolutionary insight Smith Wigglesworth shared with his students. The substance of your very being is this infinite intelligence. You don't pray to it as if it's outside you. You live from it, you recognize it, you rest in the awareness that it's already the foundation of everything you are. Now I want to go even deeper into this because understanding this intellectually is one thing, but experiencing the actual shift in consciousness is something entirely different. When you begin to realize that seeking first the kingdom means prioritizing consciousness over circumstances, something profound starts to happen in your daily life. Your relationship with prayer transforms completely. Your approach to challenges shifts from panic to presence. Your entire spiritual journey stops being about acquiring what you lack and becomes about recognizing what you've always had. And this recognition, this simple but profound shift in where you're looking for solutions, creates an impact that ripples through every area of your existence in ways you couldn't have predicted or forced through human effort alone. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to seek first," if this perspective is opening something new in your understanding. So how do you actually make this shift from seeking second to seeking first? Smith Wigglesworth developed what he called the practice of the presence. And it's so deceptively simple that most people dismiss it at first. They're looking for something complex, something that requires years of training or special initiation. But here's what's beautiful about this. It's accessible to anyone, right now, exactly where you are. You don't need special training. You don't need to be spiritually advanced. You just need to be willing to try something radically different from everything you've been taught. Here's what the practice looks like. Find a quiet moment, even just 5 minutes. Close your eyes. And here's the part that might feel strange at first. Don't pray for anything. Don't ask. Don't beg. Don't even visualize outcomes. Instead, you're going to do something that flips the entire script. You're going to silently acknowledge a truth. I and the Father are one. The kingdom of God is within me now. Divine presence is the reality of my being. These aren't affirmations you're trying to make true. These aren't positive thoughts you're hoping will manifest something. This is recognition of what already is, whether you've been aware of it or not. Stay in this awareness for those 5 minutes. When thoughts about your problems inevitably arise, and they will, you don't fight them. You don't judge yourself for having them. You simply gently return your attention to the presence within. It's like training a puppy that keeps wandering off. You don't punish it. You just guide it back again and again, with patience and kindness. This is the practice. This is seeking first in its most practical form. Now here's something crucial that Smith Wigglesworth discovered working with thousands of students on this journey. Results don't come from doing it perfectly. They come from sincere recognition. Some of his students experienced instant transformation the first time they tried this. Others practiced for weeks before feeling any shift. And the fascinating revelation was that the difference had nothing to do with spiritual talent, nothing to do with worthiness, nothing to do with how long they'd been on a spiritual path. The difference was simply the depth of their recognition. how genuinely they were able to acknowledge this truth versus how much they were just going through mental motions. If this resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who need to hear it. You see, you're undoing years, maybe decades of conditioning. You've been programmed since childhood to seek solutions outside yourself. Every time life got hard, you were taught to look somewhere external for the answer, to other people, to circumstances changing, to divine intervention from above. This mindset has created neural pathways in your brain, belief systems in your consciousness, that automatically default to seeking second. So give yourself grace as you practice this. Some days it will feel profound. Other days your mind will resist and wander constantly. Both experiences are completely normal. Both are part of the transformation happening beneath the surface, often long before you see any external evidence of change. The key is consistency, not perfection. The key is returning again and again to this recognition, even when it feels like nothing's happening, even when circumstances haven't shifted yet, even when doubt whispers that this is too simple to work. Drop a comment saying, "I recognize the presence within," if you're willing to try this practice today. Let me share something with you that might shift your entire perspective on what's actually possible. Sarah was a single mother, and when I say she was struggling, I mean drowning. 3 jobs, barely making rent. The kind of financial pressure where you're lying awake at 3 in the morning doing mental calculations, trying to figure out which bill you can delay this month without getting shut off. Every single day brought a new wave of panic, that sick feeling in your stomach when you open your mailbox and see another envelope you can't afford to deal with. She discovered Smith Wigglesworth's teachings almost by accident, and honestly, she was skeptical at first. The idea that she should stop praying for money and instead just rest in some abstract awareness of divine supply. When her electricity bill was overdue, it sounded like spiritual bypassing at best, dangerous denial at worst. But something in her recognized truth in what she was reading, so she decided to give it a genuine try. Every morning, before the chaos of her day began, she spent 5 minutes, not begging God to send money, not visualizing checks arriving in the mail, just resting in the awareness that infinite supply is the truth of consciousness itself. The first week, nothing changed externally. Bills still piled up. Anxiety still gripped her chest. But something subtle was shifting internally, a quiet knowing emerging beneath the panic. Then unexpected things started happening. A former client she hadn't heard from in 2 years called out of nowhere, offering double her usual rate for a project. Her landlord, without explanation, reduced her rent. Small things at first, then bigger shifts. Within 3 months, her entire financial situation had transformed. Not through strategy, not through working harder, but through what she described as remembering something she'd always known, like coming home to herself after years of being lost. And then there's Michael's story, which honestly still gives me chills. Successful businessman, had everything money could buy, except the one thing that mattered: his health. Stage 3 diagnosis. Doctors giving him months, maybe a year if he was lucky. He'd built an empire, but couldn't buy his way out of this one. Traditional medicine offered treatments but little hope. When he found Smith Wigglesworth's teachings, his first reaction was anger. This felt like false hope, like dangerous mysticism when he needed real solutions. But Smith Wigglesworth taught him something that completely reframed everything. The body wasn't the problem. His identification with the body as something separate from divine wholeness, that was the real issue. So Michael started practicing morning and evening, acknowledging divine perfection as the truth of his being, not fighting the disease, not even visualizing healing, just resting in spiritual wholeness. The first month his symptoms actually worsened, and fear whispered that this approach was foolish, but something kept him returning to that inner kingdom. Within a year, he was completely clear. Tests came back clean. Doctors were baffled. And here's what Michael said that captures everything we've been talking about. The practice didn't heal him. It revealed the healing that was already present in consciousness, just waiting to be recognized. These aren't isolated stories. These are examples of what becomes possible when you truly understand what seeking first actually means. When you stop looking to circumstances to change and start recognizing what's already true in consciousness, reality itself begins to Shift in ways that feel miraculous but are actually just the natural expression of divine order. Comment: I'm ready for this shift, if these stories are resonating with something deep inside you. Now let me show you how this plays out in real time, in the actual messy moments of daily life. Because understanding these principles intellectually is one thing, but having a practical response when your world feels like it's falling apart, that's where the rubber meets the road. Smith Wigglesworth. Notice something fascinating about human behavior. The moment a problem appears, we have an automatic, conditioned response that happens faster than conscious thought. Financial issue hits, instant mental spiral. Unexpected health symptom, fear floods the system. Relationship conflict, emotional chaos erupts immediately. This reaction is so ingrained, so automatic, that most people don't even realize it's a choice. They think it's just reality. Problem appears, panic follows. That's just how life works, right? But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. That split second between problem appearing and your response to it, that's where your power lives. Smith Wigglesworth taught what he called the non-reaction technique. It's brilliantly simple. When a challenge arises, pause. Just pause. Before you start mentally solving, before you panic, before you reach for your phone or start catastrophizing about worst-case scenarios, take 3 conscious breaths. And during those breaths, turn within. Acknowledge the kingdom. Internally recognize that divine presence is the only real power operating in this situation. You're not denying the appearance. You're not pretending the problem doesn't exist. You're simply refusing to give it ultimate authority over your consciousness. You're choosing to seek first, even in crisis. This breaks the automatic pattern we've all been running on for years. Instead of immediately seeking solutions in the material world, calling people, manipulating circumstances, trying to force outcomes, you address the practical issue from a centered place. And what's remarkable is that solutions emerge more clearly from this space. Actions flow more naturally. Outcomes unfold more harmoniously. This isn't magical thinking. This is a complete shift in how you engage with reality itself. But let me take this even deeper, because there's a subtle distinction here that most spiritual teachings completely miss. What you're doing in that pause isn't what most people think. Most spiritual practices operate on what Smith Wigglesworth called treatment. You affirm health because you believe in sickness. You visualize abundance because you feel lack. You pray for peace because you're experiencing turmoil. See the problem? Every single treatment unconsciously reinforces the very issue you're trying to solve. You're essentially saying, this problem is real, and I need to create the opposite to fix it. That's still seeking second. That's still putting the problem first and trying to use consciousness to solve it. Recognition is revolutionary because it's entirely different. You're not treating the problem, you're recognizing truth. Not because the problem isn't appearing to your senses, obviously it is, but because consciousness is more real than appearance. Divine wholeness isn't something you need to create through affirmations. It's an established fact. Infinite supply isn't something you manifest through visualization. It's spiritual law. Perfect peace isn't something you achieve through meditation techniques. It's your true nature. You're not trying to make these things true. You're acknowledging they already exist in the kingdom within, completely independent of whatever circumstances are appearing in the material world. This recognition doesn't fight appearance. It simply rests in what's more real. Write "I see the difference now" in the comments. If this distinction between treatment and recognition is clicking for you, there's something I need to address that might be causing you more exhaustion than anything else in your spiritual journey. Most of us have been operating under a massive misconception about how life actually works. We've been taught that results come from effort. The harder you work, the more you push, the more you force outcomes, the more success you'll achieve. So we exhaust ourselves. We grind, we hustle, we manipulate circumstances, control every variable, try to make things happen. Through sheer willpower. And yes, sometimes it works. But at what cost? You're tired, burned out, running on empty while trying to fill everyone else's cup. Smith Wigglesworth identified this as the fundamental difference between human effort and divine activity. One drains you, the other energizes you. One comes from a consciousness of lack, a desperate scramble to get what you don't have. The other flows from fullness, an inspired expression of what already is. He called this living by grace. And it's not about becoming passive or lazy. It's about recognizing there's a natural flow of good from consciousness to experience that you can either align with or exhaust yourself fighting against. When you truly seek first the kingdom, something shifts in how you take action. You stop forcing. You stop straining. You stop trying to control every outcome through manipulation and willpower. Instead, you take what Smith Wigglesworth called inspired action, steps that feel natural, that emerge from inner guidance rather than outer desperation. You're still productive, possibly even more so, but you're working from rest instead of anxiety, from confidence instead of fear, from knowing instead of hoping. The results that come from this place are often more beautiful, more perfectly timed, more elegantly orchestrated than anything you could have forced into existence through human effort alone. Think about where in your life you're currently forcing things. Where are you straining? Where? Does every step forward feel like pushing a boulder uphill? Those are the exact areas where you're seeking second, where you're operating from human effort instead of aligning with divine activity. And here's the invitation. Gently release that grip. Turn within. Acknowledge that infinite intelligence is already handling this situation perfectly. Your job isn't to make it happen. Your job is to recognize it's already happening in consciousness, then take whatever practical steps feel natural. From that centered awareness. Now let me address something about meditation that might completely transform how you approach it. Most people sit down to meditate with an agenda. They want peace. They want answers. They want healing. They want manifestation. They're essentially using meditation as another tool to get something, which means they're still seeking second even in their spiritual practice. They talk at God through prayer and affirmation, making requests, stating intentions, trying to convince the universe to deliver what they need. Smith Wigglesworth taught something radically different. He said meditation is pure listening. Not listening for answers necessarily, but simply being present. You sit in silence not to acquire anything, but to feel the aliveness within you, to sense the presence that exists before thought, to recognize consciousness itself. This requires nothing from you except willingness to be still. No mantras needed. No visualizations required. No complex techniques or years of training. Just quiet awareness of awareness itself. You sit comfortably, close your eyes, and simply be present to presence. When thoughts arise, and they absolutely will, you let them pass like clouds moving across the sky. You don't fight them. You don't judge yourself for having them. You just gently return to the stillness beneath all thinking. This is the kingdom. This awareness, this presence, this consciousness that's observing everything. It has no problems, because it exists prior to all appearances. Comment, I'm learning to listen, if this approach to meditation feels like coming home to something you've always known. Now here's where things get real, and I want to be completely honest with you about the resistance you're going to face. The moment you start practicing this, your conditioning is going to scream at you. Your mind, programmed by years of crisis management, will insist that circumstances must be addressed immediately. That bill sitting on your counter? It demands attention right now. That health symptom that showed up? It needs treatment immediately. That relationship conflict? It requires fixing this instant. And this objection feels completely valid, doesn't it? It feels practical, responsible, grounded in reality. But here's the trap that Smith Wigglesworth identified. This urgency is exactly what keeps you stuck in the cycle of seeking second. Your real-life struggles, the ones you're facing right now, exist precisely because you've spent your entire life prioritizing circumstances over consciousness. You've trained yourself to react immediately to every external situation, giving material appearances ultimate authority over your state of being. And where has that gotten you? Probably right back here looking for answers because the old approach isn't working. Seeking first doesn't mean you become irresponsible. It doesn't mean you ignore your bills or neglect practical issues or pretend problems don't exist. What it means is addressing them from the right foundation. You can acknowledge divine presence even while calling your doctor. You can recognize the kingdom within even while paying your bills. The difference is internal priority, not external action. When your house is on fire, you absolutely call the firefighters. But you can seek first in your consciousness, while taking second the appropriate practical steps. This internal shift changes how the external unfolds in ways that seem almost magical but are actually just the natural order of reality responding to consciousness. The second major challenge you'll face is impatience. And I need you to hear this because it might save you from giving up right before your breakthrough. You might practice this for a week, maybe 2, and find yourself wondering why your life hasn't completely transformed yet. You acknowledge the kingdom within, you did the meditation, you tried the non-reaction technique, and yet your bank account looks the same. Your relationship is still struggling. Your health hasn't shifted. Doubt starts whispering that this mystical approach doesn't actually work, that you should return to old methods. At least those felt like you were doing something concrete. Wigglesworth warned specifically about this impatience because he saw it derail so many sincere seekers. Here's what you need to understand. You're undoing decades of wrong seeking. Years of neural pathways that automatically look outside for solutions. Lifetimes perhaps of believing that matter is cause and consciousness is effect. This reversal doesn't typically happen overnight. Some people experience instant breakthrough, yes, but most require persistent practice. And neither path is better or worse. Both are valid journeys toward the same recognition. What's crucial to grasp is that transformation happens in consciousness before it appears in circumstances. You might practice for weeks and see nothing different externally. Your mind will use this as evidence that nothing's working. But something profound is occurring beneath the surface. Neural pathways are literally rewiring themselves. Belief systems that have governed your reality for decades are dissolving. Your consciousness is expanding into a new understanding of how life actually operates. The outer world must eventually reflect this inner transformation. Not because you're forcing it, but because that's spiritual law. Consciousness is cause, matter is effect. When you consistently prioritize the cause, the effect has no choice but to shift. Type, I trust the process if you're willing to give yourself the grace to transform at your own pace. There's something critical I need to share with you about why this practice might not be working for some people, even when they're sincere about it. Most of us compartmentalize our spirituality. We carve out a sacred 20 minutes in the morning for meditation. We acknowledge the kingdom within. We feel connected and centered. And then we close our eyes, stand up, and immediately shift back into ego consciousness for the remaining 23 hours and 40 minutes of our day. We visit presence briefly, then spend the rest of our time residing in problems. We touch the kingdom momentarily, then live from circumstances permanently. This split consciousness is why transformation remains elusive for so many sincere seekers. Wigglesworth taught something far more radical than occasional spiritual practice. He said seeking first must become continuous awareness, not constant meditation. You still have to live your life, work your job, have conversations, handle responsibilities. But underneath all that activity, there's an ongoing recognition, a remembering. As you work, you silently know divine intelligence is guiding you. As you interact with others, you recognize presence in everyone. As you face challenges, you remember the kingdom within. This isn't mental chatter or forced thinking. It's living from a deeper awareness beneath the surface level of your mind. The practical way to develop this is beautifully simple. Set gentle reminders throughout your day, maybe on your phone, maybe sticky notes in strategic places, maybe just mental bookmarks at certain activities. Simple phrases: kingdom within, divine presence, seek first. These aren't tasks to complete. They're invitations to remember, to come back to consciousness, to recognize truth in the middle of your ordinary day. Each reminder pulls you out of autopilot reaction and back into aware presence. Over time, something remarkable happens. This remembering becomes automatic. It shifts from being something you do to being who you are. It becomes your default state rather than an occasional practice you have to remember to perform. And this is where total transformation actually occurs. Not in the isolated meditation sessions, but in the continuous living from kingdom consciousness throughout your entire day. Your default responses begin to change at a fundamental level. Crisis happens, and it will still happen. Life doesn't become problem-free, But instead of triggering immediate panic, it now prompts you to turn within. Challenge arises, and instead of creating paralyzing fear, it invites deeper recognition of the presence that's untouched by circumstances. Difficulty appears, and you find yourself naturally seeking first before seeking second, not because you're forcing yourself to remember the technique, but because this has literally become how you operate in the world. Wigglesworth described this as living by the Spirit, and it's not about occasionally accessing spiritual help when things get really bad. It's about continuously living from spiritual foundation in every moment, whether things are going well or falling apart. The kingdom within you, this consciousness you're learning to recognize, it's already complete, already perfect, already whole, already lacking nothing. You don't need to improve it. You don't need to develop it. You don't need to earn access to it. You need only recognize it's already here, already you, already the foundation beneath everything you experience. And this recognition, when it becomes continuous rather than compartmentalized, transforms everything without you having to force any external changes. Comment: my foundation is shifting. If you can feel this transformation beginning in your own consciousness, if you've made it this far, I want to acknowledge something. You're not here by accident. Something in you recognized truth in these words. Something deeper than your thinking mind responded to this message about seeking first the kingdom, and that recognition itself is the kingdom acknowledging itself within you. That's consciousness recognizing consciousness. That's you remembering what you've always been. The journey we've taken together today isn't just information, it's transformation waiting to unfold in your life. Wigglesworth spent decades discovering and refining these principles, and now you have access to them in a way that can shift everything if you let it. But here's the thing. This can't be a one-time exposure. These truths need to marinate in your consciousness. They need repetition, not because you don't understand them, but because you're rewiring decades of conditioning. That's exactly why I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Not just to support what we're doing here, but because I'm committed to bringing you more of these transformative teachings, more practical wisdom, more depth on living from kingdom consciousness in your everyday life. There's so much more to explore together, and I don't want you to miss a single piece of what's coming. If this resonated with you, if something shifted inside while you were watching, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people discover this message, but honestly, it also lets me know this content is landing, that these teachings are meeting you where you are and serving your journey. And leave me a comment saying, this message was meant for me, if you feel like this video found you at exactly the right time. I read every single comment, and I'd love to know you're out there, that you're on this path with me. There's a video right here that takes this even deeper. It explores what happens when you actually live these principles in the hardest moments of life. Click and continue with me over there, because what you've learned today is just the beginning of something much bigger.